Hello, everybody, and welcome. It's Tuesday. It's 9 a.m. Pacific. It's time for office hours. I'm Jeff
Woohoo!
Blankenberg. We've got Ryan here today. How are you, man?
I'm doing good. Doing good.
Well, that's good to hear.
No complaints.
Yeah, no complaints here either. I know both of us are pretty tired today, for probably different
You,
reasons. But
you have a valid excuse.
well,
I'm just
there's
being
lots of-
lazy.
despite the fact that I was up super early today to speak at a conference in Scotland, which we'll talk about in a second, I would have been tired anyway because I'm tired always. So there are lots of excuses for being tired, for sure. What is your excuse? Did you stay up too late?
No, I went to bed early. I mean, early. I go to bed usually at 9:30. I just didn't sleep well last couple nights. I don't know.
Yeah,
Just
I'm
getting
with
old, I
you.
guess.
Sleep is elusive these days. I am usually up. Like my rule is, I wake up, I do the daily Wordle, and then like I get up and start my day. So I do it from bed before I've even left the bed.
See,
And
I gave up on Wordle. There's too many words in a row that just really made me mad. I think Vivid was. I'm like, I'm done. I'm done with you.
Vivid was a tough one.
Yeah.
Well, for those of you that don't know, Ryan is bad at word games, apparently. No, the thing I was going to say is Ryan and I were just looking this morning. Someone has created a Wordle skill. So I don't know if that's one of our watchers or not, but you can find it. It's called 5 letters, I think. And you can find that in the Alexa Skills Store. So if you're looking for a voice-enabled version of Wordle, there it is. We have a bunch of folks here in the chat already. Somebody already posted their Wordle results. I love it. So, it's interesting. There have been a couple of other Wordle clones, not word games necessarily, that I think are kind of interesting. There's one called Nerdle, which is it's a math equation.
That one's terrible.
Have you seen that one?
I did it one day and I'm like, I'm not doing this ever again.
That one is challenging, but it wasn't hard. It was just challenging. And then I started another one yesterday, and Ryan, I think you will actually like this one. It is called, oh man, why am I forgetting the name of it all of a sudden? Oh, Factle, Factle, and the website is factle.app. In fact, I don't know if today's has loaded yet, because I tried it earlier this morning and it had not loaded its data yet.
This is like a direct knockoff. Wow. Yeah. The UI looks exactly the same.
So Factle's kind of cool because it is, they have you rank something in order. They give you, I think it's 23 choices, and they want you to pick the top 5, and you have to get them in order. As an example, yesterday was number of stores in a restaurant chain internationally, and it was the total number of stores. Do you happen to know what the chain that has the largest number of stores internationally is?
No idea.
Number 1, my first go-to was McDonald's. I just figured it was probably McDonald's.
Maybe Subway?
It's Subway.
Yeah.
Number 2, do you have a guess on number 2?
No idea. That would be probably McDonald's, but maybe McDonald's isn't as far up there as I would think.
McDonald's is 3rd. Now, I had a list in front of me. It is not Taco Bell. It's Starbucks.
Okay.
Starbucks was number 2. So anyway, this Factle allows you to sort these 23 clues into what do you think are the top 5, and then it's the same kind of you have the right one, but it's in the wrong position, or you have it in the right position. But again, one game a day, kind of fun. So, yeah.
See, the problem with this though is on Wordle, I started every day with the word farts, and farts is not an option on this. So, which is weird because so many other people, I found TikToks, I found tweets, I found all kinds of other stuff where other people started with the word farts. I did not follow that from anybody else. But a lot of people just think about farts a lot, apparently.
Farts is not a bad word, right? You get a vowel.
It's not a bad word.
You get RTS. Yeah. F isn't too valuable, but the other ones are pretty good. Okay.
Maybe we should get started.
We had a question before we even went live, so I thought we would start there. This came from Twitch, from GMI8891. That's a name I haven't seen before, so welcome. I'm glad you're here. The person said, "Hi, could you please address how to prevent the Alexa skill from turning off or timing out? They tried using should end session equals false, but that didn't work. And so I'm going to take you guys on a quick journey for those of you that may not be super familiar with this process. When we think about interacting with an Alexa skill, you say something, right? Maybe it's the invocation name, or you do some kind of one shot, or even some kind of name for invocation, but you get into the skill. And the skill then responds to you and says something like, welcome to the skill, or here's the answer you were looking for, or whatever. At that point, if it uses a reprompt, and this may actually be GMI, this might be your issue. If you're using the Alexa Skills Kit SDK, we provide some taxonomy for something called a speak method and a reprompt method. The speak method is what you would expect. I said something, that's what Alexa's going to say back to me. But there are some other cases and data that we need to provide in order for her to keep the microphone open so that we can continue to listen to the thing the user says next. And so if you only use the speak method, it will say the thing and it will close the microphone, and that will end the session. However, if you provide a reprompt, this is a second phrase or something that you might say, this reprompt is what keeps the microphone open. And so the way that the functionality actually works is that the device will say whatever you provided in the speak method. And if you provided a reprompt, it will then open the microphone. If the user does not respond when the microphone is open for about 6 or 7 seconds, then the reprompt phrase, whatever you provided as text there, will be spoken to the user. So oftentimes an example of it might be like, hey, do you want to start a trivia quiz? And then silence. Hey, I just wanted to ask you, or hey, I didn't catch that. Would you like to start a trivia quiz? And then it leaves the microphone open again for that same amount of time, 6 or 7 seconds. And if they don't respond again, then it closes the microphone automatically, and that ends the session for an Alexa skill. So there are 2 possible questions that GMI8891 on Twitch is asking. One is, how do I make that happen? How do I make the microphone open? The answer to that is a reprompt, and should end session equals false is really what gets flagged in the JSON that gets passed back to the Alexa skill or back to your service. So that is really what's happening, is should end session equals false. Now, the fact that they said that isn't working suggests to me that what they're trying to do is keep that microphone open for a much longer period of time. That today is not possible. It is meant to be designed like a conversation. And if you try talking with someone, like if I try to talk to Ryan and he just stands there and stares at me and doesn't say anything, after a little while, I'm going to realize we're not having a conversation and I'm going to walk away. The same kind of functionality happens here. The one way that I've found to kind of get around this, again, using the trivia game example, is that I have a hard question. Think of it like Final Jeopardy on the television show Jeopardy. You are asked a question, and then they play that very famous theme song that I don't have the licensing to play, but they play that theme song while you think about your answer. And then once the song is done, then the host says, okay, what is your answer? You can do that same kind of thing by just tacking some thinking music onto the end of your statement, onto the end of your speech or whatever it might be. And that allows you to give the user time to think in order to be able to respond in an appropriate amount of time. But there's a trade-off there. And the trade-off is that while you're playing that music, the microphone isn't actually open yet. And so you have 2 choices. One is you play the music, and when the music's up, then the user can answer, and that works just fine. But if it's 30 seconds of music and they know the answer within the first 5 seconds, it's kind of frustrating to wait another 20 or 25 seconds. So you can train your users to use their wake word with their answer. They're still inside the scope of your skill, but they could say something like, Alexa, my answer is tacos, or whatever. And that will interrupt and automatically send that response into your skill as if they had waited the full 30 seconds. That requires a little bit of training with your users, which can be tricky too. So just something to keep in mind, but hopefully that long little monologue I just did there helps you understand kind of how that stuff works, GMI. I don't know if you have anything, Ryan, but any other thoughts on that one before I move on?
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is that the simulator in the dev console, which you can use, it is not an accurate representation of interacting with the device at all. And so when you're using a simulator, like your session can stay open for hours and hours and hours, which is not how the actual devices work. So just a warning there. And I always like to test on a device and the simulator kind of at the same time, just to make sure that I'm getting the right functionality.
There's
APL,
a lot of unexpected behaviors in the simulator. For example, if you have APL enabled, that can also introduce some light weirdness in how the simulator responds. Your skill will work exactly as expected, but the simulator can hold on to session data much longer than you expect when you're trying to exit or move on. So just things to keep in mind. And as we continue to put feedback together for that team, Ryan, we should document a reproducible way to demonstrate that from the workshop stuff that you put together.
Yeah,
because I think making sure that they understand what that simulator does and how it can set incorrect expectations for a developer. Just quickly for all of you, if you have APL turned on in your skill, so you actually go into the why am I forgetting the word?
Interfaces.
The interfaces. Thank you, Ryan. If you go into the interfaces and turn APL on, and then you talk to a skill, even if you don't provide a reprompt, it will continue to respond because the APL allows you to kind of hold on to that session for an amount of time, which that amount of time in the simulator is infinite. Where if you do it on a device, you can say should end session equals true, and you still have a few seconds to be able to talk back to that skill if you want to when APL is running. So it's an unexpected behavior in the simulator, which can be confusing because it does not work the way you would expect it to work on a device. Okay, that was a long one, but that's a good question.
Yeah, and just like we found in the new Cake Time workshop that we republished, there was a big bug which I didn't catch. Actually, one of our testers at a conference tested and discovered it, and that's because I left out the reprompt. But when you're using the simulator, the session was still alive, ready to take my input, even though I didn't have a reprompt in there. But on an actual device, it said its thing and then end session, and it was done. So it tests on a real device is my.
Yeah, testing on a real device is valuable, which is why I have a whole library of them here. It comes in really handy when you're trying to make sure things work the way they should. GMI had a follow-up question, which was, is there any way to have the skill always on the screen, even if users are not interacting? Yes and no. You can't have the full skill experience live on the screen. I think what you're describing is what a PC might call kiosk mode, where you can just kick an application into like that primary mode and it just lives there. But these devices behind me and Ryan, the Echo Show 15 was the first introduction of widgets, and widgets allow you to basically create an APL interface that you can then push directly to the screen as one of the widgets that you see there on my little screen next to my head here. There are things like to-do lists and weather apps and all sorts of other stuff. The challenge, though, is this is still in developer preview. So yes, it will be possible relatively soon, but no, it's not fully available to every developer on Earth yet. This is something we announced at Alexa Live, though, so I would expect that we're going to be able to see and use this in the very near future.
I hope.
But that being said, what's that?
I can't wait for it. I think it's going to be great for discoverability, for reminding users about what skill. It's going to be really good.
And if you have an Echo Show device, you don't have to have the 15, but if you have an Echo Show device, I think even the Echo Show 5 supports this. You can go in and you can swipe in from the top and you can find the widgets gallery in the menu. You can actually see all of the skills that support widgets in one list. They're going to have to ultimately start filtering that and allowing search and sorting. But for now, you can see every skill that has a widget available, and you can choose to enable those and then configure the widgets and arrange them and all that stuff. Okay. A. Witter shared his Wordle score today. Got it in 3. That's pretty solid. I think I got it in 4 today. Okay. Atul Raj on YouTube says, from my custom skill, the user is not able to invoke other skills using skill invocation, but from other skills like YouTube skills, user can launch my skill as well using invocation. Any suggestions? My general understanding is if you are in a skill, all the commands that are spoken to the device go through your device. And this is something that games developers especially have a challenge with, where they want to raise or have the user raise or lower the volume as they're listening to the game. If you are in a skill and you say volume up, your skill doesn't know what to do with that. You're not able to end around and provide that volume command to the system level. So that is a trick. So yes, while they're in your custom skill, they should not be able to call another skill while they're in there, they would have to say quit or stop or cancel or something like that to get out. And then they should be able to go use the other skill. The exception to that would be skill connections, which allows you to pass off one skill to another skill. But this is often done by you, not by the user speaking. So I don't know that I have any suggestions for you on this one, but hopefully that clarifies kind of how that works. Jolwork says they want to write a skill to help solve Wordle. We were just talking about this morning.
We were.
I have a word that has a G and an A, and the G is in the 5th position. Here's a list of words I might recommend for you to try next. That would be pretty cool.
That's called cheating, though. So I'm not sure if it's help you solve. It might be help cheat at Wordle.
Are you cheating at work if you get a reminder before the meeting you're about to attend? Is that cheating?
Yes, it is. It is.
I feel like it's not cheating in that we don't all have an infinite dictionary in our heads, and some of these words are hard. Today's word was pretty hard. Some claim that it's not even an English word. It is very much an English word, but I feel like, I don't know, anytime you rely on a computer to give you information, that would be considered cheating, I guess. I don't know how I feel about that. Maybe I do agree with you. I'm not sure.
It's a game. It's supposed to be fun.
It is supposed to be fun, and I don't cheat. But I can see how, especially with as public as people are with their posting their Wordle scores, that it becomes important for people to represent themselves the same way. It's the same way with like things like Instagram, right? People have to show that they're somehow wealthy and very attractive and have all sorts of like expensive things. But what they're actually doing is going out and renting a Lamborghini for a day and doing like a whole photo shoot that they can spend like the next 3 months slowly leaking those photos out through their Instagram so it looks like they own a Lamborghini. I will never understand that logic, but there are people that do it. Or like, somebody that's just going to brag endlessly about how they have a smart home enabled chicken coop, right? Like that's the kind of people that I just no smiles, no nothing. I think your chicken coop is super cool.
That's to help chickens stay alive. All right.
True.
Although I have a story about my chicken coop, but maybe there's a lot of questions as well. I had to get rid of my rooster. He attacked me, drew blood. So rooster's gone.
Oh man.
So, he wasn't doing anything anyway. He was just eating all the food and bothering the hens. So we still have 6 hens, so we're okay.
All right. Very good. Are there any updates on the replacement for developer rewards? I can't remember what the new program is called. It is the Skill Developer Accelerator Program. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
SDAP. Skill Developer Accelerator Program. I'm pretty sure. No, there are not any current updates, but I would imagine that there will be some public updates for all of you relatively soon. I don't know what the specific timeline is on that, but there have been no shortage of conversations about it. So I don't know when they will actually be able to make those announcements. But I thought it was supposed to be in Q1, and we're in the last month of Q1. So we will see.
Yeah.
All right. So Don says he's officially stopped pursuing Amazon Pay for Alexa. That pains me so much. It hurts me at my core, Don. But I know it's not your fault, and it's probably a healthy choice. At some point, you just have to stop the fight. And I'm very, very sorry to hear that. All right, moving on. We have Yikun Deng on LinkedIn. Hi, Jeff and Ryan. Nice to meet you. My name is Yikun Deng, and I am currently an applicant applying to the Alexa Communications as a language engineer. I'm wondering if you might have some insights about the language annotation in Alexa. My interview is coming up this Thursday, so I'm diving into the job responsibility and leadership principles. I've gone through Alexa Developer Console's guidance of language annotation and a couple of blogs from Amazon explaining how Alexa understands, and I lost the rest of your message. That's where it stopped for me. No, I don't have any specific insights for you on language annotation other than to take a look at, and I don't know which side of the language annotation game you're coming from. But as far as the input that we as developers create, we are using a library that I'm forgetting the name of. There's xsampa and there's another one, Alexa SSML reference. Let's see, there's two specific phoneme alphabets that we use for marking up language when necessary, and I'm forgetting what the library that I use all the time, IPA. So the International Phonetic Alphabet, or the Extended Speech Assessment Methods Phonetic Alphabet, which is xsampa. So I'll take this. I'll drop this in the chat. This is the side of things that I would know about. I've spent more time than I'd care to admit thinking about all of the different phonetic sounds and pieces that put words together. But I don't know that that's specifically what you're asking about. You might be asking about how we are synthesizing speech on the other side. So that I do not have a lot of insight for, unfortunately. Okay, Vladimir Kiryanov. What do you think about local development? He's asking this from YouTube. I personally love local development. This is where I spend all of my coding time. Ryan and I have talked about this a bunch. I use the developer console to make small edits to something or last minute changes, or maybe to create the skill before I download it. But most of all of my development work is done locally. I guess the biggest exception to that is some of the voice interface construction that I do. If I'm doing something elaborate with slots, or especially with dialogue management, it is so much easier to go into the developer console and like, I have this slot, it's required, here's some things I want you to say. It generates all of that for me, and then I can just bring that down for local development. But especially for my backend, all my Node.js services, that is all done via local development. And what I'm using for that is the Ask Toolkit for VS Code. So if you guys aren't using the Ask Toolkit for VS Code, it has all of that stuff built right in. And it's absolutely fantastic. So I would recommend checking that out. How about you? You're primarily Python. Do you do your stuff locally as well?
I do. So for the skill front end, I am finding a lot of times I'm going into the console and making changes. Like adding APL is like 50 lines of JSON that you add to your configuration, and that's much easier to just click one button and generate that. But you're right, like all the backend code for like the skill that I'm developing now, I'm actually not even, I'm using the SAM framework to deploy all my Lambda functions. But that's because I have many other Lambda functions and a bunch more architecture to be able to handle my backend code. But I'm doing all that locally using SAM, which is kind of an extension, sits on top of CloudFormation to deploy my architecture up into the cloud. And like, I think most serious developers go about this way because number one, it allows you to version control and be able to deploy consistent architecture. So I could take my repository and go into any AWS account, click deploy, and there it has everything set up for me all ready to go, which is just amazing.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So local development is the way to go. And then you can write unit tests and have those run locally and do a build before you push up and so on.
Cool. 100%. Alex Insignes on YouTube says, I'm a developer and I'm currently developing an IoT device which I want to be connected to Alexa. Is it possible to connect it using Python? My instinct on this, and I've only dabbled in the IoT stuff, is that yeah, you should be able to do that if you have a device that can run Python, or if you have a service in the cloud someplace where you're running Python. All of that should be doable. What I don't know is there's two ways to think about connecting a device to Alexa. One is your device itself has a microphone and a speaker, and you're talking to the device. Or the alternative, which I think is maybe where you're leaning, is more like a smart light switch. I have a light switch here in this room. I can talk to my devices, and it can then trigger the light switch to turn on and off. In that case, you can it's actually pretty simple to do. You can use a smart home skill. So if you look up Alexa smart home skill, it's a template you can choose as you're building, and that allows you to connect your APIs to our smart home configuration, our smart home voice interfaces, basically. And it allows a user to talk to their device, say, turn on the office light, for example, and it can map then, oh, office light is this company with this API. I'm going to send a signal to this to turn that light on or off. So that is what I would recommend there. And I know Ryan and I have a colleague. His name is Andy, and Andy is hopefully going to start joining us here in office hours. And he will probably have a more knowledgeable answer for you on this. But my recommendation would be either start with an Alexa smart home skill or look at the AVS, Alexa voice service, which allows you to run Alexa locally on your device. So depending on which angle you're going for, those are the two things that I would recommend checking out. GMI8891 also asked, can I ask Alexa to make a call or open a website while using the skill? No, I don't believe so. I think that you are locked into the skill experience when you're in the skill, and being able to use any of the first party functionality. Tell me a joke, make a fart sound, like all sorts of stuff that there is a first party experience for. None of those things are exposed or available without exiting the skill. There probably are exceptions to that. For example, in an emergency, I haven't actually tested this or verified it, but I would imagine if you're in the middle of like an adventure game, you fall and break your hip, I don't know if you have to say stop first and then call an emergency service or whatever. I don't actually know, but it feels like probably that's still the case. Because when you're in a skill could have any number of interactivities. And as a result of that, we wouldn't want our first party experiences to get in the way of your skill. So that's why I'm leaning that direction.
Yeah. I think it's a good general rule of thumb.
Yeah. Vladimir Kiryanov wants to know if Visual Studio Code, is it possible to do? He's the one that was asking about local development earlier.
Yes. I pasted a link to our Getting Started with ASK toolkit for Visual Studio Code.
Cool.
Documentation. So hopefully that will get you everything you need to know. But yes, it's a really nice toolkit that allows you to manage your skill. So definitely check it out.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, Visual Studio Code is where I spend most of my time. So that is definitely the place I'd recommend you start. Joe Work says, I have an Alexa skill that asks you for the letters and blanks in a word and gives you the possible solutions. Brilliant. Brilliant.
Cheating.
So many smart people. Cheating. So Alex Insignias was asking about, do we have a link to examples or a framework for, he's the one asking about getting his IoT device hooked up. Do you think you could drop in links to AVS and to
yes,
an Alexa smart home skill? And I'll continue moving on here as we go. Atul Raj wants to know how YouTube and other skills launch other skills using invocation. My assumption would be anytime you find that experience, it is probably a first-party skill, something that we ourselves built. That is my only thought. There are a number of what appear to be third-party skills like YouTube, but I don't know who built the YouTube skill. I don't know the answer to that question. And there are a number of skills that are kind of like that, where we have built the experience. But in general, I think there's probably some special set of permissions that we as third-party developers probably do not have access to. GMI 8891, tons of questions. Keep them coming. These are great questions. Is there any difference between beta testing and a full skill publishing in terms of skill performance, except more users being able to access a skill? No, I'm not aware of any difference. The only catch is that it's invite only, and that it only lasts for 90 days and it cannot be extended. But no, there should not be any difference in performance. And I'd be very curious if you have an example of where you're seeing throttling or something like that. I would be surprised, because a beta test can have up to 5,000 concurrent users. That's a pretty significant number for any skill. So no, I wouldn't imagine that there's any throttling of any kind. Okay, scrolling. Deepanshu Jain on Twitch wants to know, when will the ISPs for India and Canada go live? It's been a while since it was mentioned at Alexa Live 21. I thought that it had, but it's sometimes hard.
It should be should be available. So I'm pasting in the documentation link. What specifically was the ISP for India and Canada?
India and Canada.
Canada's,
Yeah.
If I'm looking at the right documentation, Canada's on the list.
It does say right at the top of this page, developers based in India are unable to add in-skill purchasing to their skills in any locale at this time.
The big giant blue box, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's new or old, that note. I think that all notes like this should have a date on them. Like when was this posted? Because it does say supported countries and regions, and you can see that the marketplace Amazon.ca is right there.
Mm-hmm.
Amazon.in is not currently in the list though. So it seems like maybe Canada is there, but not India.
That's what I'm seeing as well.
Now, I know one of the real challenges with this, and this is something that I think we've talked about publicly, is that there are a number of interesting tax rules that India has that make some of this stuff very challenging. And so I would imagine that this is more at the level of negotiation between Amazon and the Indian government about how to make sure taxes are appropriately attributed and all of that stuff, more than it is that we don't just want to turn it on. That would be my assumption. I don't know that that's true, but that's kind of what my intuition tells me. So, but Deepanshu, you make a very good point. It has been quite a while since Alexa Live 2021, and I do apologize for that. And hopefully this will be something that is remedied soon. Ryan Tarbox says, regarding kiosk mode, several of us have created APL that does a repeating slideshow that can stay on the screen indefinitely, using auto page and buttons to speed up, slow down, and pause. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Brian, is that shared anywhere? Is that something that these people could find on something like APL Ninja or something like that? That would be handy for people to be able to see an example of that.
Yeah, I've seen like custom dashboards that have like custom widgets being built with APL Ninja.
Yeah, I think it was
pretty impressive.
One of our champions, Mark, was getting frustrated that he hadn't been accepted into the widgets program yet, or the developer preview. So he's like, I just built something myself, and this turned out pretty cool. And I was like, it did turn out pretty cool. So I don't have any info for everybody on where we can find that kiosk mode sample, but I'm betting Brian will share it in just a moment. Habuma said, local code development is wonderful stuff and allows for quick change and feedback as you make changes. He has a video that he posted on Twitch about using VS Code and how to do that. And another thing to mention is that it's not just local development, but it's also local debugging. You have a way in VS Code to actually substitute your endpoint and let the skill know, so that instead of calling your Lambda function, it's actually using an instance of your code running locally on your machine as the endpoint. So you can make changes quickly, talk to your skill in the simulator, and it's actually hitting your local machine as the endpoint, rather than a Lambda function where you have to like log everything out. You can set breakpoints. You can do all sorts of stuff. It's fantastic.
Andy is here. Should I add him to the
Let's
stream?
do it.
Hey, everyone.
Hey. Good to see you. Everybody, this is Andy Haldeman. Andy is the third member of this stool, and we as a team are responsible for all of the Alexa things, but Andy specifically focuses on the devices team and the devices world. So Andy, there was actually a question earlier. I'd love to get your perspective on this. I have answered it to the best of my ability, but I'd love to hear if you have anything additionally. So Alex Insignes, I don't know if I'm saying his name properly, but he's on YouTube. He says he's a developer and he's currently developing an IoT device and he wants it to be connected to Alexa. Is it possible to connect it using Python? And the quick answer that I gave was, well, how do you mean you're connecting it to Alexa? Do you mean you have a light switch that can be controlled by Alexa, or that you actually want to talk to your IoT device and have it be able to be an Alexa device and like communicate that way? Those are the two options I think that I thought he might have. And I said it's either AVS or it's a smart home skill, but I'd love your perspective on maybe there's a third option. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, with the smart home skill, you can definitely do that, right? I'm actually trying to figure that out myself in terms of how it should work. But my understanding is that you can connect your Lambda through to your device through like AWS IoT Core. And so you should be able to do that. Now, I don't know what exactly you mean by connecting via Python. I mean, your code could be in Python and Lambda, you know, and make calls to IoT Core, but that is one way that comes to mind. With AVS, you know, the SDK is in C++, and so I don't know how, I mean, off the top of my head, I have to think about how you could communicate to your device through Python there. I'd have to think about that and come back to you. The other major ways to connect your device, like if you were going to use Alexa Connect Kit, right? That's all built in for you, right? And that's where Amazon is managing your, you know, the cloud and the communication with the devices. So that wouldn't be a good option for you if you wanted to communicate with it directly with your own code.
Cool, thank you. All right, I'm gonna keep plowing through questions here, but if we have more hardware questions for you, and if you guys haven't met Andy before, Andy hopefully will be here on the regular going forward. And in addition to that, he is also in our Alexa community Slack. So he is paying a lot of attention to the hardware specific channels. But if you have questions for him or us in general, you can always find us in Slack. And now is the time when I put this on the screen. So if any of you are not yet in the Slack, you can join there at alexa.design/Slack. So hop in there, find us, have a conversation with the people in the general channel. That's where a lot of the conversation happens, but would love to hear from all of you.
Yeah, Andy hangs out in the smart home channel quite a bit. So devices, smart home questions, definitely hit him up there. He'll be happy to talk to you.
All right, moving back into question answering mode. I can't believe it's already 38 after. TezaWorks on Twitch said, how would you ideally design or code a skill that has both ISPs in the US, Canada, and the UK, and non-ISPs in India and Australia, all of which are English locale versions? Would you use logic to route the user accordingly depending on their locale, or make sure that the ISP code is only in the ISP-able locales and vice versa? And do you remove the reference to ISPs in non-ISP locales? Okay, this is a really big question, but I think I have a relatively simple answer for this. The way that skills are structured is that there is an independent interaction model for every locale. So you have an interaction model for EN US, which is English US. You have another one for EN AU. You have another one for EN IN, right? So each one of them is an independent interaction model, which means that you can make changes to each one of them as you go through this. So for the non-ISP places, I would eliminate any of the intents that I have in my skill that refer to ISPs, right? Like the buy intent and the upsell stuff and all of those kinds of things. You can just eliminate those from those versions. As far as your backend code goes, I would never recommend running 5 or 10 or 12 versions of the backend system that is your code. But if the intents aren't available, then they generally can't hit the endpoints that would, like, they would travel through your intent into your code. If that intent doesn't exist because they're in a place that doesn't offer ISPs, then it should allow a pathway for them to still come into the skill and use the basic freemium version of your skill without having access or knowledge of the fact that there is premium content hidden behind some walls. Now, where this gets tricky is where you want to give them a very different experience. Because you can't sell them anything, you want to give them more content. In that case, yes, now you're going to have to start building some if statements or some conditional logic inside your skill to say, well, because you could see their locale in your code. So you could say, oh, this is an Australian customer. We're going to give them access to 10 stories instead of just the 2 that we give to people that can buy these things. That is logic you can write in your back end that also doesn't require you to go through certification to make changes to it. So if and when India does finally release ISPs and you want to change your logic, you can just jump into your code, remove the if EN-IN logic from it, and you should be off and running. So just something to consider, but that would be my recommendation. Just be very conscious of what your interaction model looks like for each of those locales. I know we offer tools that allow you to kind of deploy to one language and then it spreads them across the rest. I would opt out of that and instead be very specific about what my interaction model looks like for each country. So that's my long, short answer. Okay, Yikun Dang wants to know, thanks for these insights. We were talking with him earlier about the language stuff, and he's applying to Amazon about semantic language annotation. but I'm really interested in phonetic annotation too. I'm really sorry about missing information from last message. I've gone through some blogs from Amazon explaining how Amazonians annotate text semantically and handle language ambiguity from the semantic side. Cool. Well, I wish you the best of luck in your job application. Hopefully you land the gig. And if you do, once you're on the inside, hit me up and say, hey, I'd love to meet you. Okay, Jalwork says, my video may help for IoT Python stuff. And Jalwork has a video out on YouTube. And the link is there on Twitch. I mentioned earlier, Andy, I didn't use your last name. I was waiting until you got here. But I said our teammate Andy is coming, and Crackmac on Twitch thought I was referring to Andy Jassy. He thought Mr. Jassy was just going to show up and join us here on the stream. I think he's probably kidding, but that's funny. Okay, moving past all the links. Man.
Yeah, we have Jeff and Andy here this week, so
we've got it covered.
It's different Jeff and Andy then.
Santosh Kalshetti on YouTube wants to know, by using an Alexa skill, can we develop a scientific calculator? Yes, 100%.
Sure.
You would have to you'd have to provide that logic to be able to provide those scientific calculations, right? So, for example, doing calculating a square root or exponential math, any of that kind of stuff. If you can write the logic for it, which honestly in most code isn't very hard to do, then yeah, you could very easily say, hey, what is 10.2 to the 32nd or something. That would be pretty easy to do. The catch with that being, I think a lot of a scientific calculator functionality is already available as a first-party experience. So if you ask, for example, if you just ask your device what the square root of 18 is or something, it'll be able to answer you. So I'd be curious to know if there are specific parts of the scientific calculator that you're looking for that is not offered by that. Okay.
You could probably build a graphing calculator with show devices.
Totally.
You want to get crazy with it.
Yeah, that would be awesome, actually.
That would be a lot of work, but you could.
Oh, let's see. GMI with more questions. I love this. Do you know why the shadow functions on frames and text, I think he's talking about APL, frames and text work and appear correctly on the Alexa simulator, but not on my Echo Show 10? The shadows appear correctly on the simulator, but when I open the skill on the device, there are no shadows. My initial guess is that the shadows you're referring to are actually a selection indicator in the APL tools in the simulator. Is there a shadowing effect in APL?
Let me look that up. There is shadow styles, absolutely.
Huh. Well, if that is a thing,
I didn't know that was a thing.
Shadow color, shadow radius. Yeah, we do shadowing. That's good. I mean, that's pretty standard, I guess, in a lot of vector art. But I have not played with shadows. Now I'm gonna have to do that. I would be curious to know why the shadows aren't showing up on the device, though. I don't see any reason why that would happen. The only thing that I could ask you to check, and this is grasping at straws, would be to look at the version software on your Echo Show device and make sure that it's up to date. Generally, they are updated on their own, and it's not something you can even really prevent. But that's my only thought, is that maybe you have a slightly older version of the device, and so it doesn't have the latest APL updates. But I think shadowing's been around even for a little bit. That's 1.2 shadowing, so it's pretty old. I do not have a better answer for you on that one. My only other thought on this is that maybe there's somebody on APL Ninja that has done some shadowing work, and we could try and use one of their samples to see if that does anything. More than likely, it is probably a conflict between something you have. Maybe it's a layering effect. I mean, we'd probably have to dig in to really understand why that's happening that way. But it doesn't seem like it should. If you're seeing it in the simulator, generally I would expect it to work pretty well on the device, although they are separate and different. While I continue to press on this, I have not heard anything else yet. Revital Schwartz on LinkedIn wants to know if there's any progress with the Arabic language in the Alexa app in Israel. Just to recap this for Andy, I don't know if you're familiar with this issue. If you have the Alexa app in Israel, up until we release the Arabic language, the default language was English for Alexa. When we released Arabic, it appears that we actually changed it. And so now the default and only language for Israel is Arabic. And Revital, being one of these folks, is not an Arabic speaker. He's an English speaker. And so now he can't use his device because he can't understand the Arabic language. And it feels like that's a weird change to have just made. And I haven't gotten any feedback yet on trying to escalate this. So I'll push on again with this today, Revital. But this feels like a weird behavior, not something that I would expect us to do. So I'll have to continue to look into that.
Yeah, doesn't sound right.
No, I agree. Mahler Sachs is asking a question that we started to talk about a little bit earlier. When rendering a video on APL, intents like volume up or down don't work. How do I use standard Alexa intents with custom intents during a skill session? Cheers. You don't. I wish I had a better answer for you on this, but there's not currently a way to take system level controls and expose them inside your skill. I wish that there was, but that is not something that is currently possible today. So you can use the hardware buttons on the device itself, but if you're across the room, that's obviously not too useful. But yeah, you would have to stop the skill, change the volume, open the skill again. I believe. I don't believe. I need to try this now, since I've said it so many times. Alexa, open unofficial Star Wars databank.
Hello there. I can answer your questions about people and places in the Star Wars universe, and even vehicles, weapons, or droids. What would you like to know about?
Tell me about Luke Skywalker.
You asked me about Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker was a
Alexa,
Tatooine farm boy who...
Volume 10.
I didn't find a match for Volume 10, but you can ask about a character
Alexa,
or a species.
Volume down.
I didn't find a match for Volume down.
Yeah.
Alexa,
You can ask...
quit. Okay. So I wanted to make sure that I proved that to myself that I was right before I continued on this. But when you are in your skill, you are limited to the scope of your skill, not to any of the system level commands, as much as that would be nice. And I think that the future of the fallback intent may have to start to accommodate some of these things, but I don't have any roadmap about if and when that stuff might change.
I would love to see just like a small subset, like starting with volume up, volume down. That seems to be like, I had the same exact problem with one of my skills when I was developing it and creating a video skill.
The challenge is that you as the developer also have some volume control, right? Within your SSML, you can set the speech level to loud or soft. And so if it's possible that I could have volume control commands and I could be controlling the volume inside of my skill, even though I'm not actually modifying like the device system level volume. So it's weird because you end up with these potential conflicts that I'm not certain how we would resolve them. Okay. Is there a link to the YouTube video for VS Code? I think you're talking about the video that someone else mentioned.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can go back and find that. Habuma 1 is the one with this link. Here, I got it. So this, and we'll do YouTube. So this is a link to Habuma's video. Again, I'm not offering any warranties or guarantees. I haven't seen his video, so I always like to just qualify that. But this is the video that Habuma shared. Okay, now back
Better
to...
not be a Rickroll. Better not be a Rickroll.
Yeah, I mean, it could totally be a Rickroll. I'm making no promises at all.
We like Habuma, though.
Brian Tarbox offered a link to his... I'll just show this on here because it's probably easier to just go to APL Ninja and search for it. But this is... If you go look for Brian Tarbox's APL, this is his kiosk mode APL. So you can find that there if you'd like to go look for that. Again, not clickable, but you should be able to go search for this on APL Ninja. King Strunker on Twitch said, Andy mentioned some type of API or library for talking to the devices. I missed the name of that. Can someone post a link?
I think you mean AWS IoT Core was a service that can talk to the device over MQTT, but I don't know if that's what you were referring to or not.
We will find out in a minute. We'll continue down this this chain. We're almost at the bottom of the questions, actually.
Okay.
There's a few people that we're trying to help out with the shadow stuff. And so Dana Voice found this APL Ninja document,
Nice.
which Alexander Martin made, called 3D Text. So this allows you to play with some shadows. So I would take a look at this one on APL Ninja for that. GMI also wants to know lots of very intelligent questions. I appreciate all of your questions, GMI. I always tell people, like, some people are nervous, like, am I asking too many things? If you have questions, ask them. We're happy to take all of the questions. And GMI, make sure that you also join the Slack, because you could be asking these questions all week. I hate the idea that someone has to wait until Tuesday morning to talk with us. So if you have questions, ask them in the community Slack. I think you'll be amazed how quickly you can get answers and how resourceful that community is. So the question was, is it possible to add a scrolling bar on the side to show scrolling progress to an Alexa grid list or image list? Yes, yes, you can. I don't know that there is a built-in control for that, though. So it may be something that you actually have to kind of construct yourself. I'm not aware of a scroll bar control at all. I'm going to look for that right now, but
because you can scroll. Like, you don't need the scroll bar. You can scroll.
But if you're trying to show some sort of
like,
progress,
hey, there's stuff down there. There's stuff below the fold. Like, a scroll bar is super helpful with that.
But I don't believe, I haven't seen an actual scroll bar that shows you, or that like you could control. So you're actually controlling the scroll bar rather than just flicking the screen with your finger.
Right.
But you can use the scroll view control does have values that you can look at, which are scroll offset and scroll percent. And so you could use scroll percent to create a pretty rudimentary scroll bar that just shows you where in the status of that page you are. But no, I'm not aware of a specific scroll bar control.
Yeah.
And GMI wants to know how he can join Slack. I feel like he was tempting me to put this back on the screen. You can go to alexa.design/Slack. This is a direct invitation immediately into our Slack community. We do ask that you use your real name so that people know who you are and they can interact with you that way. But please, by all means, join. And you'll find that you'll be in the general channel, but there are all sorts of channels in there. A lot of them you actually have to choose to opt into. But there's topics on all sorts of content for Alexa development, including APL. So I'd recommend you check those out. All right, Andy. One of my long-running wants is some type of API to interact with and query your own Alexa devices, your own Echo devices. So you can get things like Zigbee hub status, sensor status, send a song or speech to a specific device. There are APIs the mobile app uses that just aren't public. I thought it was maybe missing something in this, that there maybe those were available, but maybe he misheard. So I don't believe what he is describing is available to the public.
No.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah. I think the APIs for smart home primarily revolve around the idea that I want to be able to collect a command on a device, and I want to have a IoT device respond to whatever that command happens to be. And there is another set of APIs. This came with V2 of smart home. I think we're on V3 or 4 now. But V2 of smart home changed the game a little bit, where the device itself went, like, I have a light switch over here. It's a physical light switch also. And if I go push that switch, there's still an API call that goes back to Alexa to let it know that, by the way, that light switch is on or off now, whatever its new state is. So the devices are communicating both ways, to communicate state and also to execute commands. But that's the only stuff I'm aware of.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't see, if you build your own skill, for example, like you can control your own device that's tied to that skill, but you're not able to see all the other devices, like create your own hub essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we did it. We made it to the end of the questions. That doesn't always happen.
4 minutes to spare.
I know.
Well,
And
you had to call
usually-
me in from the bench. That's why.
Right,
Three of
we-
us, we can get through all the questions.
Yeah.
You know what's funny is usually when we mention this, then all of a sudden there's like 15 more questions just before we run out of time. Yeah, so Dana was, he is very anxious to be able to like enumerate his Echo devices, check things like temperature. I don't know if the devices themselves are aware of their own individual temperatures, but I can see how people would, again, I can control my light switches. I can, sometimes there's APIs that allow me to talk to and be aware of all the devices that are on my network. And I think he's just looking for a way to do that same thing with his Echo devices, which isn't an unreasonable request. I can see how that would be handy. King Strunker is responding to Dana Voice and says, the smart home APIs are more so geared for a device maker, not really the end user or a skill builder. It would be cool to think about that for the future. Home Assistant actually has a support for this, but it's not official, obviously. So that was just a comment. I won't go deeper on that unless you want to, Andy.
No, I think it's good. Thank
Okay.
you.
Santosh Kalshetti says, how to learn all Alexa skills.
Take time.
Well, I don't know exactly what he's asking either. I want to make sure that we're covering all of our bases here. So one, if you want to know how to build an Alexa skill, Ryan nailed it. You want to go to the Cake Time tutorial. It'll teach you how to build an Alexa skill from scratch without any technical knowledge even. It'll walk you through everything. And you can use either JavaScript or Python, and it gives you all the sample code and everything you need for that. But if you're asking, how do I learn about all the Alexa skills that are available? Like, I want to use other skills. I was amazed the number of people that aren't even aware that there is a store. So I'll post this in the comments here.
Look, I added a banner. Oh, no,
Amazon.com/skills. Now I don't know if this redirects automatically for you depending on your locale, because if you're UK or something, you're not using .com, but Amazon.com/skills will take you directly to the Alexa Skills store, where you can search and peruse and even enable skills directly on your account. So go check it out. There's lots and lots of cool stuff there. And I am really amazed every time I talk with end users, not developers. Developers tend to know what's going on here. But when I talk with end users, I'm like, yeah, there's a store. It's got like 100,000 different skills in it. They're like, there's apps for Alexa? Like it blows their mind. So it's clear to me that we're probably not doing a good enough job of letting people know that this stuff doesn't exist or does exist. But it's also, it's something that we need to be very actively thinking about, because if they're not thinking about apps for their device and they think it just tells jokes and does simple math problems, then they're not getting the full value out of it either. It doesn't redirect for the UK. Thank you, A-Witters. So you should be able to go to amazon.co.uk/skills, and that should take you to your store. But that would be my expectation. I'm pretty sure that redirects on all the different URLs, but .com may not take you to your local. You may have to do amazon.in or something like that. Treylass says the store still needs to hyperlink the publisher name to a page of the publisher's skills. Yes, absolutely. That is the number one piece of feedback I've been providing for 5 years, and it's still not done. I'm just as angry as you about that one. I want it to happen. And it doesn't seem like it would be hard, but I agree with you, Trade Last. All right, we are officially at time. We've answered questions for an entire hour. Well, Ryan and I have. Andy came in a little late, but I'm so glad he's here. So hopefully we'll see Andy here more regularly, and he'll be here to answer your questions about hardware devices, smart home, all that kind of cool stuff. Thank you guys all for tuning in today. Thank you for being here. We're here every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific, and we're in Slack the rest of the week. So come find us in Slack. Come find the rest of the community and participate. We'd love to have you. Thank you guys all for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.